Well, dear participants, good morning. I see it's already 12 in Kiev and 11 in Brussels, but I think we have still like a couple of minutes and we can wait for for another people to join us. So take your coffee, tea, whatever, and let's come back and get started in 2 minutes. Okay, then, so I think it's time to begin a little bit. We will be welcoming the other people to join us. And today, first of all, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And you are welcome to our webinar related to PFAS and REACH and what business can do with this new and existing in Europe, but new for Ukraine, chemical legislation. And today I have an honor and pleasure to introduce our honorable speaker, Ms. Caroline Watt, Senior Director, Strategic Communication Segment of FTI Consulting in Brussels, Belgium. Thank you, Ms. Caroline, to join us and for joining us and telling us more about this topic. And before we start, I would also remind to all our guests today that this is the event that was organized with the support of the International Renaissance Foundation and the European Union within the framework of the joint initiative, European Renaissance of Ukraine. And this is one of our webinar of the series. So, okay, now I'm done with my short introduction and the floor is yours, Caroline.
Thank you so much, Olga. So maybe before I pull up the slides, a couple of words to myself and why I'm talking to you about chemicals today. As Olga already said, my name is Caroline. I sit in Brussels normally. Today, I'm actually in Germany. I'm at my sister's place because she's celebrating her 40th birthday tomorrow. So because as my name might tell you, I am German, but I've been living in Brussels for 12 years. I've been working at FTI for 10 years. And in all those years, I have been dealing very closely with chemical policy. And it's an evolving landscape in Brussels, especially that you might know that chemicals is one of the areas where the EU has a very large competency. But of course, that also goes beyond the EU in terms of both setting a precedent. When the EU does chemical policy, many other jurisdictions often follow. And also, of course, anything that is imported into the EU needs to comply with these with European chemical policy. So with that, maybe short introduction. I don't know, I see quite a few people here. If you have any questions now already, or any points that you would like me to touch upon in my short speech, my short presentation, please do let me know. Either put it in the chat or raise your hand or just shout it out. At the same time, also, when I'm speaking, please make it interactive. Let me know if you've got any questions. Olga, I'll be showing some slides, and I have to admit also, Zoom is not my preferred platform. Usually we use Teams. So if there's anything that I'm missing, don't hesitate to interrupt me and let me know, because the more interactive, I think the more fun. And lastly, my presentation will focus heavily on PFAS, because that is the very, very hot topic at the moment. But REACH and just chemicals policy overall is also well within my remit. So again, if you'd like me to talk more about that, please do let me know. So now I'll pull up my slides unless there's anything else. There we go. Is that in presentation mode now?
Yep.
Yes, great. So as I said, regulating PFAS, especially what Ukrainian companies keep in mind, there is quite a lot. But maybe starting with PFAS, PFAS, they're called perfluorinated alkyl substances. Maybe a quick 101 to see what we're actually talking about. No fear, I am no chemist. I studied political science a long time ago, but it is sometimes helpful to ground us in what are we actually talking about. We are talking about one specific group of chemicals when we talk about PFAS, and especially what they're known for is this bond, the carbon-fluorine bond, which is one of the strongest bonds in organic chemistry, so I've been told. Again, I don't really know. I trust the people that I work with. And it's a very, it gives PFAS a number of characteristics that are both positive and negative, depending on the usage, and we'll get more into that later. But this is sort of just to ground us what we are really talking about. And PFAS, I have to say, is not just a European concern. Quite on the contrary, we're seeing growing legislation really around the globe. And even in the EU, we've got the so-called universal PFAS restriction, which will be the main topic of this presentation, just because it's such an important process that we're going through. But there's also been in the EU ongoing initiatives to regulate PFAS in the circular economy. So the packaging and packaging waste regulation, for those of you who are familiar with it, that's just been passed. It also forbids PFAS in food contact material. We're looking at a number of water regulations. PFAS is also a big topic there. You've also got in the US, for example, my colleagues there have been telling me all about the state-by-state approach. Minnesota, Maine, California, one of the usual suspects, I'm going to say, are leading the way, which are giving them a kind of a patchwork to work with. And then, of course, the federal agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency has just issued some binding, I believe, guidance about PFAS that cannot be used at what concentrations. Apart from the trade impact that generates, there's also, of course, it ladders up. So even the OECD and the United Nations Environmental Program have taken note of PFAS as an issue. So the OECD specifically is seeking a mandate. They want to develop a global risk management framework, and they're already starting on sort of the important meetings. And then at a global binding level, I'll say there are already regulations and prohibitions in place. Again, not sure if anybody has heard of PFOA, PFOS, and PFHXS. They're the main known PFAS, and they're already banned on a global scale under the so-called Stockholm Convention. So nobody should be using these to date. Right, and as I said, we're going to be talking mainly about the EU today. So what is this PFAS restriction? You might hear it from a number of people. It's caused quite a stir, but then again, I live in a little bit of a bubble, not just the Brussels bubble of EU diplomats, but also a chemical bubble where we think we're the most important. And this is all anybody has been talking about for the past couple of years, even to a certain extent. But why is this causing such a stir? It's because it's the biggest restriction that we've ever seen. It covers over 10,000 substances in one go. So the EU is applying what is called a grouping approach. But usually this grouping approach, when it's been used in the past, has been used on tens of substances or maybe hundreds, not thousands, and certainly not tens of thousands. What does that mean for this restriction in practice? We're not actually able to tell you which substances are being restricted, not on a one-on-one basis. There is no database where anybody can look up, okay, is this substance part of it or not? That's left up to the individual companies to find out. The second one is, and I talked a little bit about the characteristics already, PFAS and this fluorine bond makes it very, very durable, or also known as persistent. And that is the trait that the regulators are looking to inhibit, because once it comes into the environment, these chemicals don't go away. I'm not sure, maybe you've heard in the news, I believe that PFAS chemicals have been found in the Antarctic, in the Arctic, in untouched places of the world. So they're here to stay. If they're toxic or not is usually a question that should be answered, but in this case, the regulator has decided to ignore it. What does it also mean? It means that the users are the ones who are responsible for demonstrating if they need to use this chemical or not, if there are alternatives, if there are, a necessity to use a PFAS or not, really lies with the companies that would like to use it. And here it's also important to note that this is not only about using it in the final process or in the final article, but also in the machines that are made to process it. I can give one example. Semiconductors, for example, they use PFAS within the semiconductor, but they also use PFAS in the manufacturing when different components are moved around a factory. They have to be done so in a way that doesn't damage the very fine elements that are used in semiconductor manufacturing. So they use a lubricant, and that is made out of PFAS. So, and that's also thinking one step further, whose responsibility is it to show that we need these PFAS? Well, it lies within the value chain, but even there's some open questions. And lastly, the regulators have specifically mentioned that not just the current PFAS are in scope, but everything future PFAS would need to undergo the same process. So especially the pharmaceutical industry is very concerned, because about 30% of all pharmaceuticals use fluorinated substances. Although pharmaceuticals are out of scope, research and development of pharmaceuticals is not. So if there was a new substance to be found, it could be that it falls under the PFAS restriction, because it's research and development and not pharmaceuticals at this point. I don't see or hear any questions, so I'm just going to keep going. So why does it matter, and why does it also matter for the companies? Oh, I actually see a hand up. Oksana?
Yes. Hello, thank you.
Hi.
Thank you for this interesting chapter. And I wanted just to clarify if this EU PFAS restriction is regulated in any legal document, because we were talking about packaging regulation.
Mm-hmm.
And if I understand correctly, is it somewhere regulated on more global, not globally, but I mean at the EU level, but in one legal act? Possible.
Yes, that's a very good question. The short answer is not yet. So the EU is in the process of making this a restriction under REACH, which will become it'll be in the REACH regulation. Basically, it'll be in under Annex 17, which lists all the restrictions. There it will be restricted. But that's likely going to take a while. I'll come to the timeline in a little second.
So thank you. And as I understand, currently it is regulated partially, as you mentioned, in packaging regulation or in some other act, but more general, it is not prohibited.
Exactly. So you've got the circular economy, you've got some of them in water, but this universal PFAS restriction, the big one, that's not in force yet. Great. Right. So why does it matter also for companies that might say, well, we're not a chemical company, we don't really, that's not our issue? Well, the reality is all sectors use PFAS, from transportation, energy, industrial machinery. I mentioned semiconductors before, but also in other electronics. You've got medical, you've got pharma. And here I've got, this is like, I know that this is a very busy slide, but just to give you an idea, we've got these slides for a number of industries, but renewable energy, for example. So you've got all kinds of applications. I won't go through them in detail, but there really is PFAS everywhere, which is, a little bit, how do you say? They have been called forever chemicals, because like I said, they are very durable, they are very persistent, but they also seem to be a little bit everywhere chemicals. So you've got them in also hydrogen. Hydrogen Europe, the European Trade Association for Hydrogen, has been very active on this, because they need certain elements to make the hydrogen production a reality. So why is the EU doing this? Because they want to avoid what is called so-called regrettable substitution. It's a bit of a technical term, but basically what it means is that they don't want a known hazard, so something that they've assessed and seen as a problem, to be substituted by something that could also be a problem, but we don't know it yet because it just hasn't been assessed. So one of the better known examples of that is, you might have heard of BPA. A lot of companies claim to be BPA free, but a lot of these companies have simply moved to using BPS, which is a very similar substance without the same, well, we don't know if the risk profile is the same at this point because the process of evaluating BPS has only just started. So that's basically, in the end, what the regulators wanted to do with this very, very large restriction was to say, well, just substituting one PFAS for another isn't going to work. We're going to get rid of all of them unless you can show that you need them. Oksana had a question a little bit about the timeline. So this is a REACH restriction. REACH restrictions have a set out timeline that we are going to miss completely just because of The size I already talked about. There was also a public consultation when the authorities first proposed this restriction. They have to put it to the public to ask for opinions, and normally these restrictions, they get maybe 20, 30 comments. The record to date was for another restriction on microplastics. They got about 300 comments. This REACH restriction, this PFAS restriction, got 5,600 comments. I worked with some companies on writing these comments, and they're real scientific treaties. They're not position papers. They are data. They are newest research. So it's taking them quite a while, them being ECHA, it's taking the European Chemical Agency quite a while to get through all of this information and to, of course, then apply it as well. So where normally, according to the normal legal timeline, we'd be looking at a restriction that would be ready to go in kind of 2025, and then it all has a year and a half of a transition date. So the real impact would be felt in 2028, 2029. Here we're looking at probably 2030 until we have a very clear idea of what the actual impact is going to be, and then with the transition period of 1.5 years, it might be even later than that. So I've got a lot of clients that the first question that they always ask me is, when is this happening? Unfortunately, the answer is, I don't know, but it's not only me who doesn't know, nobody knows at this point, because it's just part of the process. The chemical agency has to do its due diligence and go through all of this new information that they've received, and make sure that they also come up with something that is hopefully workable for companies. What can be done? Again, a lot of companies that I talk to, when they hear 2030, well, that's not, that's far away. They don't want to deal with this. They don't want to have to get to understand this, what is a very complex process for a very complex set of chemicals. But the reality is that there has already been a lot of engagement, and we would urge all companies who are affected by this, and I would say that everybody is, to a bigger or to a smaller extent, should get involved, talking to either the value chain, so your customers or your suppliers, to understand what they've been doing. We've seen unprecedented also public engagement by trade associations here in Brussels, some that don't usually come into the spotlight, but are doing so now because they've understood what the potential effect is. We've seen politicians wade into this, even though it's very much at the moment still at a technical stage, but even before the European elections that took place last weekend, Ursula von der Leyen, I'm going to say current Commission President, wrote a letter to the MEPs, to the members of Parliament, that the PFAS restriction would not hamper European innovation. So even she is aware, and she's following this. And then, of course, educating all customers, third parties, anybody basically that can be talked to, and is willing to listen about what this means for European and not only European and EU industry, because again, and then maybe that should have been clearer on the slides, this restriction counts for all products that are placed on the market. It doesn't matter how they are placed on the market, either by being manufactured in Europe, but also being imported into Europe. So any imports that have PFAS in them should technically be blocked. The big question, of course, that the EU cannot answer at this point is how that's going to actually be enforced. That's going to be quite impossible, if you ask me, but they have set their ambitions very, very high. That's sort of my quick presentation on this topic. I know this was a lot of information, but I hope you got to take some of it away from it. And of course, I'd be very happy to have a discussion to answer any questions. Please, Vladislav.
Yeah, hello to all. My name is Vladislav, and I'm representing the mining industry. And this is specifically very interesting for me because we are now designing, and we will be commissioning the plant, mining and processing plant for graphite concentrate, and further on spherical graphite. So my question first regarding this PFAS, and the second regarding the REACH regulations at all. So regarding this PFAS, what is the final goal? Is this the totally, let's say, to prohibit, right, the PFAS at all? Because PFAS is almost everything. If we're talking about the plant, the manufacturing plant, it's everything. This is the lubricant, this is the oil repellent, this is the grease repellent, this is the water repellent. I mean, all the manufacturing processes with the machinery, they all involve PFAS. So what is the goal? To totally stop using it, or to find some kind of alternative material, or to, let's say, to prohibit only in the final occurrence the PFAS in the final product, which will be imported by us, for instance, to European Union?
So that's a very good question. The authorities that came up with this proposal said that they want to reduce the use of PFAS by 95%.
So it's almost forbidden.
Exactly. And of course, the way that they see it is that it should lead to innovation in alternatives, looking at other possibilities, coming up with, what they call safer substances. I'll be honest, everybody that I've talked to has told me that research is ongoing, but even though there are some companies that have alternatives, these aren't scalable. They're not ready for manufacture. They're not ready for, widespread use. So, yeah, I think
TRL level, the technology readiness level is very low for now, right?
Exactly.
I understood.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and because on your slide with your presentations, you showed us that the PFAS widely used in the in the hydrogen production, which means we are following toward the Green Deal, right? Toward the total reduction of greenhouses and carbon, and now we are trying to prohibit the substance which is using. Which uses the Green Deal to reach our goals. All right, and then the next question regarding the product. So if, for instance, our mining and processing plant is now in Ukraine, right? And we will be exporting, and the European Union will be importing our graphite concentrate and spherical graphite. So should we be looking at restrictions of PFAS inside of our final product, or even to restrict it in using in our machinery in the production plant?
So I think, technically it should be that the EU only has jurisdiction over what is finally imported, so the graphite. Of course, they would like to also change the way it's manufactured, but the reality is that they don't have the remit to do so. But of course, I mean, the one thing where they could pull you off, I'd say, is if you have any contamination, because the concentration limits that are set, even for contamination or what have you, are so low. They're 25 parts per billion, and for most of the substances, they're not even analytical methods. And so again, here we have, on the one hand, a very high ambition, but on the other hand, not the tools to actually enforce it. So I think very concretely for you, the answer is if it's not in the graphite, you should be fine. If you can, guarantee in a way that there's no contamination through the PFAS that is in your plant. So the what's it called? Unintentionally added PFAS, shall we say?
Mm-hmm. So it's not a part of the technological flow sheet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If you were processing in the EU, of course, that would be very different.
Yeah, for sure, understandable. But we could expect, for instance, when I hope sooner will be a part of the European Union, we as a mining and processing plant, we could expect some kind of due diligence to our plant to investigate. Do we contaminate with this PFAS our final product?
Yeah.
Understandable. And may I take one more minute from you, because I have like really lots of questions. We are looking forward to follow all the restrictions and the strict rules of European Union, because we want to be a part of. So we don't want to just fly around. You know, we know exactly what we need to do. So regarding the, you mentioned that I may ask you one question regarding the REACH regulation.
Sure.
Of course, the final product, REACH regulation is actually regulating the substances, right? The material, not the final product.
Exactly.
And our product will be final product for you, which will be the imported graphite concentrate or spherical graphite, right?
Mm-hmm.
In our technological scheme, in our flow sheet, we will use reagents, different chemical reagents. They are certified, the producers of these reagents, they are, for instance, one from Germany, other from Belgium or from Austria. They certified their reagents, their substances by REACH regulations.
Mm-hmm.
We will import it in Ukraine and use in our technological scheme, which means already certified by REACH substances will be a part of our final product. Should we do the double REACH, let's say, certification of our final product when we will export it into European Union, because it's already certified? I mean, the reagents already certified in the European Union, but REACH regulation.
The reagents, yes, but the graphite itself would have to be certified, no? Because even graphite, I believe, is under REACH. I have to admit, this is I'd have to look this up.
Because it's like a raw material. I mean, for us, this is the final product. For you, it can be intermediate product or a raw material in production, for instance, of battery for electric vehicles.
Yeah.
So for us, it's a final product. From your side, from your point of view, it's an intermediate product. So how do we classify it, and what should we show? How should we follow to comply with the REACH regulation on that?
I think it might make sense if we have a conversation about this, because there are other details. Maybe Olga has my contact details. Maybe she can put us in touch.
Oh, I will be grateful. This is very important for us, and thank you so much for your attention to this. Yeah, I will take the contacts, and if you don't mind, I will write you an email.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much. Thank you all participants. Sorry for it took your time, but I have lots of questions on very important topic. Thank you so much.
Are there any other questions? I don't see any. Maybe one last thing to note as well is that REACH will also be revised in the next mandate. We're expecting the process to start in April 2025. It was supposed to be revised already in the last mandate, but it'll be revised in this one now, and that can also have a potentially large impact on companies around Europe, I'll say, because what is decided there, and it's going to be, I think, a very long and very political process rather than a technical one. So we just have to hope that it doesn't end up with unscientific regulation, but I guess we'll see.
Caroline, may I ask you a question, like more general, but also related to our today's topic? To your mind, the latest election process and the new position of Hungary to leading the European Union agenda for the next couple of months. Do you think it will play some? It may play some role on adapting REACH and any other regulations from Green Agenda? May it slow it down or make it faster? Maybe in some case.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I saw a chart yesterday that this is the most right-wing parliament that has ever been in the EU, and that is for sure going to have an impact. What we also saw was the so-called green backlash. So the Greens were very strong in the last elections. That was also because it was the heyday, like the highlight of the Friday for Future. But now I think in Germany that I was following the closest, they lost more than half of their seats, whereas the right-wing party got a lot of votes, unfortunately. Hungary, the Hungarian presidency, I don't think will play such a big role, just because it's a 6-month process, and in 6 months they will decide what they want to focus on, and it will be something different than the Green Agenda, but then the next presidency will likely pick that up again. But yes, I think overall, because there was a lot of focus on, you know, road transport and biodiversity. All these things have been passed, so now it's a question of implementation, which is in the member states. Chemicals were kind of put to the side. So I hope that we can have maybe a more balanced discussion now with this parliament, especially when it comes to the REACH revision, to come up with something that is more manageable and not driven by green ideology. I don't have a problem with green policy making, but ideology in policy making is always difficult. So maybe hopefully taking the ideology out a little bit and coming up with something that's more practical and actually usable is my hope. If that actually happens, I'm afraid we have to wait and see.
Yeah, I'm asking actually because I also heard about this backlash, but I think it's just some kind of temporary notion, and it won't develop further. This is my opinion. I think that they will like keep the main line, and they will go ahead, maybe a little bit slower, but they will do their job.
Absolutely. And I think we can't forget either, you know, the person who brought the whole Green Deal and made it her flagship is from the centrist right party, right? Ursula von der Leyen represents the European People's Party that, I don't know, in Germany it's the CDU, it's like the Christian Democrats. This was not a green agenda. This was a centrist agenda. And now we just have to see, indeed, there will probably be a slowdown, but it's not going to change completely. I think we have another question. Oksana, it would also be super helpful if you maybe told us who you're representing or you know, what company you're affiliated with, if any.
Okay, thank you, and sorry for not introducing myself at the beginning. I'm my main job is at SoftServe, IT company, and I work as environmental sustainability lead. But additionally, I'm also engaged in a non-governmental organization which deals with zero waste, and I'm actively involved in advocacy of best practices regarding waste prevention and reuse, refill, and so on. That's why I'm very curious about packaging regulation, because as you may know, or maybe you don't know, but just for your information, currently in Ukraine, we are elaborating a draft law on packaging, and but it's based on the directive, which is still valid, directive, yes, of the EU. But we recommend to take into account all these provisions and novels which are introduced in the regulation, which is related to packaging, and one of them is also PFAS. And what is your opinion as to including this this restriction to the draft law on packaging currently in Ukraine, and what is the fate of this? What is the future of this regulation, because it has not been published in the official journal yet?
You mean the packaging
regulation? Yes.
Yeah. So I'm not an expert on PPWR. I have colleagues who are. My understanding though is that the big decisions have been made, so it's not been published. No, but there won't be significant changes at this point. But I say that with a caveat. Like I said, I'm not the expert there. When it comes to PFAS, I think there's a broad consensus overall, also in the industrial and scientific community, to really differentiate between what is called consumer uses and commercial uses. Sorry, industrial uses. And that is also because, and you mentioned sort of end of life, and maybe to Vladislav's question as well before, what are they trying to achieve? The reality is, the best I think that they can hope to achieve is to make sure that these PFAS don't end up in the environment. And in industrial uses, that's relatively easy to minimize. I'm not going to say completely get rid of, but you can minimize, how much ends up in the environment, because they are very highly regulated processes. There's controls in space in place. So, for example, if you're talking about hydrogen, it's one membrane that is very important. Companies also look to recoup that membrane when it's done, because it's valuable. So there's already a natural recycling in place. If you look at the consumer uses, which for me packaging is part of it, the biggest challenge that they have, which you know probably very well, is that it's very hard to reclaim this packaging, and it's hard to understand where they end up in future. And that's how it usually ends up, or that's how the chemicals also in the long run end up in the environment. So I think in the long run, there has been, like I said, this consensus that for these consumer uses, and that includes packaging, and includes the so-called cookware, so the Teflon, they also don't need that level of durability that is necessary for, the industrial processes. So I think there will be a phase out. And if the Ukraine, there will be a phase out absolutely in Europe or in the EU. I think it would make sense for the Ukraine to follow suit, to show, also some boldness, I'll say, in regulation, because I think it's absolutely the way it's going to go.
Thank you so much for your broad answer. Thank you.
If there are no questions now, I said before, Olga has my contact details. I'm happy for you if you come up with a question later on after, maybe it's settled all a little bit. You're also more than welcome to reach out at a later date to ask your questions.
Caroline, one more question to you. Is it possible to share this presentation that we got from you today? Okay.
Absolutely. I will send that through to you, and then you can maybe distribute it to everybody who joined today.
Okay, dear guests, one more last call for questions. This is a very unique opportunity to take the information almost from the source, one of the first sources, and one from which is not published, which is not public yet. And if you want to have some insights, just Go ahead, jump in. Okay, okay then. So I would like to thank you all, and of course, the biggest thanks and appreciation is to Caroline. Thank you for your time and for making it more clear to all of us. And I hope it's not our first, it's not our last meeting, and we will go ahead with more ongoing conversation about this topic and other topics. And I hope that the companies, the participants of today's event could find the reliable partner in their business project. And this is like basically one of the way we're making this webinar possible is to help businesses to adapt to new regulation, and especially those who are working or are going to work with European partners, because European integration is coming. It's unstoppable, and it's better to get ready earlier than now to try to comply later. Okay, so thank you so much, and see you next time on our next webinar. Thank you, Caroline, one more time.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure, and yeah, I'm looking forward also to the growing integration sooner, hopefully, rather than later.
Okay, so you have a wonderful day, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Caroline. Thank you so much, Olga. You
Thank
as well.
you. Bye
Thank you
bye.
so much for this
Bye.
meeting.
All the
Yeah.
best.
Bye.